Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Joker is unlike most other comic book movies. There's no post-credit scene, people actually bleed. Robert is De Niro, not Downey Jr. But Joaquin Phoenix and director Todd Phillips crafted a dark character study using a number of surprising influences, and it's all filled with interesting foreshadowing clues that make this film super interesting to analyze. So join me as I break down Joker scene by scene for all the details you might overlook. Spoiler warning in case you haven't seen the movie yet. Okay, the film opens on Arthur Fleck, Joaquin Phoenix applying clown makeup in the break room of his workplace ha-has as radio news broadcasts the decaying state of Gotham City in 1981. Now, we can assume it's 1981 because the report describes garbage pileups inspired by the real-life sanitation worker strike in New York in 1981. Arthur Fleck is a new name for the Joker, not adapted from any DC comic in particular, though Phillips does appear to take a lot of influences from some literary material I'll get to in a bit. Some have pointed out some irony in the name Arthur Fleck. A Fleck, sound a bit like Affleck, another man who cringes every time he hears Batman. Arthur forces a smile in his face as a tear rolls down his cheek, hinting at his broken inner state. A clown who must forcibly stretch a smile into his cheeks. We will see how this opening imagery links this Joker to the future Batman of this film, the young Bruce Wayne, with Arthur using these same fingers to stretch a smile into his face as well. This parallelism continues in Arthur's attack in the next scene. Some kids steal a sign and beat him with it. The camera pulls away from Arthur, broken and alone in a Gotham alley, a formative breaking point, just like the movie's final act will leave Bruce. Arthur takes public transport trying to entertain this kid, but gets admonished by the mom, where we learn he suffers from uncontrollable laughter. Phoenix went super method for this role, examining patients suffering from the real disorder of pathological laughter and eating an extreme diet to lose 50 pounds. Yikes. Arthur meets with his therapist named Deborah Kane, probably a reference to Bob Kane, co-creator of the Batman character. She references Arthur's past committal in a mental institution. There's a brief cutaway showing him slamming his head against a wall. This could be suggesting Arthur's past incarceration in Arkham Asylum, and you'll notice it's a similar setting as the one seen in the closing scene of the film, implying maybe that this whole movie's plot could actually be a fantasy in Arthur's mind. Be sure to check out my explanation of Joker's ending for more details on that theory. Arthur discusses how he's pursuing stand-up comedy, a detail inspired by the Joker origin story presented in Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, which ends with Joker suggesting that his past is actually multiple choice. Always a mystery, which, if this movie's ending is truly up to interpretation, might also parallel that canonical mystery to the character. It's hard to tell, but Arthur's joke notebook is filled with, in addition to some pretty dark writings, some upsetting drawings and images cut out for periodicals, it looks like. On his way home, Arthur must trudge his way up these steps. And in the third act, Arthur, having fully transformed into the Joker, triumphantly dances down those steps. The ascension reflects Arthur's struggle to surface back into sanity and stability. His descent will reflect his proud descent into madness. In his building, Arthur meets his neighbor, single mom Sophie, played by Zazie Beetz, Domino from Deadpool 2. Sophie is one of the most fascinating characters in this movie because she's a barometer for Arthur's grip on reality. Throughout the movie, it appears that Arthur forms a romantic relationship with Sophie, one that really doesn't make sense. They go on dates. She watches his stand-up, something even the best girlfriend in the world should never do if her boyfriend's an aspiring comic. And she supports him through family health struggles, which seems like they're moving a bit fast. But later, it is revealed that Sophie and Arthur probably never had a conversation after this one in the elevator, until he shows up in her apartment. All of his moments with her were fantasies. He was alone for all of it. In a sense, she's kind of a reverse Marla from Fight Club, a woman the unreliable narrator thought wasn't his girlfriend but actually was in that movie. Arthur lives with his ailing mother, Penny Fleck, played by Frances Conroy. Living with his mother, in a way, paints Arthur as a kind of Norman Bates figure, a deranged killer with serious mommy issues. Arthur is given a revolver to protect himself from another clown who works with him, Randall, character actor Glenn Fleshler, whom you might recognize as the Yellow King from the first season of True Detective. Outside their office is a big mural for Amusement Mile, the carnival region in Gotham City from the comics that shows up again and again in conflicts between Batman and the Joker. Arthur's favorite TV program is Live with Murray Franklin, Murray played by Robert De Niro. De Niro's casting and this movie's whole plot are really signs of the two biggest cinematic influences on Todd Phillips' vision here, Martin Scorsese's films, Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. In Taxi Driver, De Niro played Travis Bickle, a loner who plans an elaborate assassination who instead rescues a teen sex worker in peril. Arthur's dark rambling, partially nude, alone in his flat, posing with his gun, it's all inspired from Travis Bickle. In The King of Comedy, De Niro played Rupert Pupkin, a struggling stand-up who violently forces his way into a spot on a late-night talk show similar to Arthur's goal in this film. Arthur fantasizes himself in the studio audience at Live with Murray Franklin, where instead of his unique laugh being mocked and judged, Murray singles him out and compliments compliments him, invites him up on stage with him, he gives him a big hug, says he wished he had a son just like him. In this moment, Murray is established as one of two father figures to Arthur, Thomas Wayne being the other. You'll notice that Murray's set curtains look almost exactly like the curtains from The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in the early 80s period, and the program's title lettering is the same font used in the Batman the Animated Series titles. Murray closes out all his episodes by saying, "Remember, that's life," and his band plays the music of Frank Sinatra's That's Life, words that Arthur will later say directly into the camera after killing Murray. But here in the apartment, when the credits roll, the names visible on the screen include some Joker production staff shoutouts: Ben Gadolari, the travel coordinator, and Will Limpert, a production secretary. On the news, Penny and Arthur see Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, played by actor Brett Cullen, returning to DC Films after playing Congressman Gilly in The Dark Knight Rises. His depiction of Thomas Wayne is less of the philanthropic doctor that Thomas classically is, and more of an elite snob who looks down on the poor. Originally, Alec Baldwin was going to play this role, but Baldwin stepped away to avoid any comparison of this Thomas Wayne to Baldwin's famous SNL role as a New York elite with a similar background. I am referring, of course, to Tony Bennett. Who do you think I was talking about? Arthur observes other stand-ups at Pogo's comedy club, laughing at all the wrong moments. Pogo the Clown was the name used by serial killer John Wayne Gacy. He used a clown identity to lure in the children that he tortured, raped, murdered. So yeah, a comedy club named after a killer clown. Perfect place for a future Joker to get started. After accidentally showing his gun during a performance in a kid's hospital, Arthur gets fired and runs into three Wall Street bros on the train. They're harassing a woman, but then they turn on Arthur's laugh. One of them sings "Send in the Clowns." It's a show tune from Stephen Sondheim's A Little Night Music, with lyrics that pretty closely reflect Arthur's show business career performance anxiety, though yeah, kind of a weird thing for a bro to sing to someone to bully them. They beat him up, but then he turns on them, shoots, and murders the three. He escapes into a bathroom and dances to calm himself down. Now, this dance seems inspired by Murray Franklin's intro dance on his show, so Arthur is mentally fusing violent outbursts and a sense of release with his dreams of fame. It would be like running someone over with your car and then hopping out to do the Conan dance. That would not be a good guess for Conan to bring onto his show. Hey, back to Arthur's fantasy romance with Sophie. They go to a diner located on Jerome Avenue, which you could interpret as a nod to Jerome Valeska from the Gotham TV series. He's a kind of a proto-Joker, twin brother of Jeremiah Valeska, who becomes the actual Joker in that series. Around Gotham, Arthur's murders become celebrated among the angry, unemployed masses. There appear to be some parallels with the story of Bernie Goetz in New York in 1984. He was a guy who shot panhandlers for allegedly threatening him. Goetz became weirdly celebrated among New Yorkers for vigilante justice, taking back the city, though he ended up being judged by history as maybe not the best guy. Sophie watches Arthur's set at Pogo's, which starts to go poorly due to Arthur's inability to control his laughter, but right as he begins his big joke, the sequence suddenly edits away with positive laughter to make it seem like it went well. But we never actually see his joke until Murray broadcasts it on his show later, suggesting that in his own self-narrative, a moment that Arthur saw as uplifting and confidence building was taken away from him and turned into an embarrassing defeat. Arthur reads one of his mom's letters to Thomas Wayne and sees where she called Arthur Thomas's son. So Arthur visits the Wayne estate where he meets the young Bruce Wayne. Bruce sees Arthur and slides down a pole, a fun little nod to the Batman trope of sliding down poles into the Batcave. After doing some magic and weirdly putting his fingers in this boy's mouth, a younger Alfred Pennyworth appears, tells Arthur to scram, and then later Arthur sneaks through a police barricade to a VIP charity event showing Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, which is another major cinematic influence on Joker. Modern Times centers around the Tramp, Charlie Chaplin's tragic clown persona, who in that story is similarly stuck in a soul-crushing job. He suffers a mental breakdown, he incites class revolts, and he falls in love. Arthur meets Thomas in the bathroom, confronts him, but Thomas tells him that his mother was crazy and lied about their affair. So Arthur returns home, but finds his mother needing to be hospitalized. Over at the hospital, Arthur is approached by two detectives about the shootings, one of whom is named Burke. This could be a nod to Detective Thomas Burke from the Batman Detective Comics of the 2000s. In the hospital, Arthur sees Murray playing a clip from his Pogo set to mock him, making this back-to-back moments of father figures rejecting Arthur. At the Arkham State Hospital, perhaps this movie's version of Arkham Asylum, he looks into his mother's medical records from Brian Tyree Henry's character. Her doctor was named Dr. Benjamin Stoner, a name from the DC Comics of the 80s. Arthur steals the records and realizes that Thomas was right. Penny did adopt Arthur and allowed him to be abused by one of her boyfriends, perhaps causing the trauma that led to his pathological laughter and mental illness as an adult. So Arthur returns to the hospital where his mother is and suffocates her. And then we shift into the third act and it becomes clear how Arthur is actually detached from everyone in his world, two father figures who didn't ever really care about him, his mother who lied to him, and it turns out the person we thought was his girlfriend who's actually a stranger to him. He sits in Sophie's living room and tells her, "I had a bad day." Those words are another nod to Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, which includes an amazing monologue from the Joker that includes the line, "All it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. That's how far the world is from where I am. Just one bad day." In his solitude back home, Arthur finds this old photo of his mother with the words written on the back, "Love your smile, TW," presumably Thomas Wayne. So despite the medical records proving otherwise, again, we get this competing evidence for what exactly is true in this narrative. You could see this as another clue to this whole narrative being fantasized by Arthur, or Penny being crazier than we thought and writing this note herself, or Thomas Wayne actually having the affair with Penny, but using his influence to falsify the medical records. Arthur gets a visit from Randall and Gary, then he violently murders Randall, allows Gary to escape. He accepts the invite to Murray's show, dresses up, and dances down those steps to the Hey song. And Phoenix said this dance was actually inspired by Ray Bolger's dance in The Old Soft Shoe, noting that Ray danced with this odd arrogance and had this unique way of turning his chin up. At the top of the steps, those two detectives spot Arthur. They chase him through the streets to the train, where they get consumed by the angry clown protesters and allow Arthur to escape. So at the studio, Arthur's dressing room is room 404. That number was the first chapter of the influential Batman Year One comic storyline. Now, Joker doesn't appear in that arc, but Year One's grounded approach and focus on Gotham as a living, breathing city, just like 1980s New York, is certainly a very big part of this movie. Along with Murray himself, Arthur meets his booker, played by comedian Mark Maron, and left alone in his dressing room, Arthur leans back once more and points the gun at his chin, the final of many setups that telegraph that he would perform a knock-knock joke that ended with him shooting himself on live TV. But like any great joke, the real punchline subverts our expectations. Arthur's talk show appearance begins well. He plants one on sex advice expert Dr. Sally, a nod to 80s icon Dr. Ruth, who actually appeared alongside Joker in his talk show appearance on the David Endocrine show in the comic The Dark Knight Returns, which, along with Year One and The Killing Joke, are probably the three most influential Batman comics. In that scene, the Joker made his talk show appearance shockingly deadly as well. Arthur confesses to shooting the three guys on the train, and he rants about how society has abandoned him and created him. He evokes Howard Beale's famous rant on live TV in the satire film Network. In that film, after Beale is gunned down, there's a shot of a control room showing all the screens reporting his death, similar to the control room shot after Joker shoots Murray in this film. And if you're watching closely during this scene, actor and screenwriter Justin Theroux was among those in the studio audience. So the streets of Gotham explode with violence from clown protesters who free Arthur from police custody, but one rioter sees the Wayne family leaving the movie theater. That movie is Zorro the Gay Blade, a nod to The Mark of Zorro, the film that the Waynes were famously seen the night they were murdered in Batman history. Also visible on that movie theater's marquee is the movie Excalibur, which was the film on the marquee in the Wayne murder scene in Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman. These details, along with the visual of Martha Wayne's pearl necklace snapping, make this Batman origin story consistent with the classic portrayal. Bruce is left alone in the alley, shattered and ready to begin a life of tortured vengeance, just like how Arthur was in the opening sequence. Except in this Joker's fantasy, it was the Joker's actions that ruined Bruce Wayne's life and created the Batman, instead of the other way around. Phillips also includes a little detail of two super rats crawling past Bruce in that alley, perhaps another Scorsese nod to his iconic final shot in The Departed, with the symbol of a rat representing how a corrupt city has descended into a bloodbath. Arthur uses blood to officially baptize himself as a Joker. The same moment Bruce is baptized in a way, Arthur smears blood up on his dimples to an even broader smile. Behind him shines a sign for a porno theater called Ace in the Hole that could be a nod to the final scene of The Joker in The Dark Knight, in which the Joker uses this exact phrase in his last laugh.
You need an ace in the hole.
And that brings us to Arthur Fleck's last laugh. Suddenly cuffed in a mental institution, his psychiatrist asks what's so funny. Arthur responds, "You wouldn't get it." Now again, check out my explanation of this ending scene for how this moment could reframe the whole movie as just a fantasy of an unreliable narrator. But one final little nod, as he walks down the hall, he leaves bloody footprints, telling us he must have violently murdered that psychiatrist. It evokes the final look at another iconic villain, Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. That final sequence cut away from a tense standoff, leaving the woman's fate unknown for a moment, until when he steps outside, he checks his boots for blood, a subtle callback confirming he killed her. Comment down below with your thoughts on this film. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss, and to help us finish construction on new sets so we can move out of this temporary blue dungeon that might be the zoomed inside of a porta potty, please consider becoming a patron for New Rockstars Digital Studios. Patrons will get access to exclusive premium breakdowns, behind the scenes content, our Discord server, and lots of other special perks. And you might be able to get on the list of special shout outs like these past or current heroes. Yeah, you're great. Oh, thank you. If you can help us out, click on the link in the description below. Thanks for joining me. Bye.